What's up, everybody? Alongside Craig Ludwig and not alongside Sam Nestler, but he's here. He's not here. He's over there. I'm Owen Newkirk. Let's talk about the big storylines, the things that we're tracking ahead of the start of training camp on Thursday as Dallas gets ready for the 25-26 NHL season. Luds, the first thing, coaching moves, right? Glen Gulutzan is in. Pete DeBoer is out. Neil Graham, David Pelletier added. And Alain Nasreddine maybe gets to do some different things that he perhaps otherwise couldn't. So to me, looking at the coaching staff, that's a huge part of going into training camp this year.
Yeah, and I say this quite a bit. A new coach comes in, and there's players that do get a second chance to make a first impression. And usually those are your bottom six forwards that are going to try to prove that they can get a little more time in there. But I think it's an adjustment for a lot of these guys, coming off of Pete DeBoer and his system, the way that he went. And I'm sure that with Gully being there, there's going to be some things he's want to change. And he talked to us a little bit. We're hoping we see a little bit more physicality. He talked about 1% from each guy. So go for it, guys. And some system changes, and for me, obviously, is how are they going to play in front of their goaltenders this year in their own end. But I think you get some excitement. And I think what's important is to get off to a good start. And whatever the coach is going to try to sell, they're hoping that the teams get off to, because now all of a sudden they start to believe in what the little tweaks are. And then there's a different kind of an excitement.
Before I ask Sam a follow-up, I want to ask you a quick one. How will you see tactical changes? Will it be preseason games, or is it going to have to be regular season before you really get a grasp of what Gully's trying to do?
Yeah, I don't think you're going to see everybody jump on board. Not that they won't jump on board, but for it to be able to come and become cohesive until maybe 20, 30 games in the season. It depends on the change. I mean, are there going to be big changes or little minor ones? But I think for the preseason games, you're really trying to get a look at some of the younger guys. That's really what it's about. So I don't think you're going to change a lot. He's not going to have a full hour before every game and let's go over this, let's do this. There'll be 2 or 3 things that he'll try to implement and just say, let's work on this. Here's what we're looking to, we want to see this out of the new guys and for the guys that have been here, we're going to add a couple little things. But for the most part, there's not going to be a lot of drilling down on each zone and in your D zone and things like that. There'll be some guidelines, and I think they're just going to see how they fit.
All right. Sam, on your side, you've already seen a little bit of this at the Foundation Golf Tournament this past week as far as the interaction with the coaching staff. Are you tracking that vibe? Are you looking at the tactics? What of the coaching staff changes are you looking for in the next couple of weeks with training camp and preseason?
Yeah, both sides. What Lutz just said was exactly what I was thinking off the hop here, was that last year, talked to anyone who was new last year, took a lot of time to get used to Pete DeBoer's system. And I'm assuming that's going to be a similar vibe this year, because now you don't necessarily have a ton of new players, but you're bringing in the new coach and the new systems. And as Goalie said a million times, he's not trying to change everything here. They're not going to overhaul all the systems. They're not going to play a totally different brand of hockey. So that's really going to make it easier on these guys, because the changes will be a little smaller. But the other side of it that I'm super interested to see is the communication. And you mentioned it, the way the coaches are open about things, the way that it's just a different vibe between player and coach that it feels like. And I'm really curious to see how that can translate, because does that mean the team's a little lighter maybe when they need to be? Does that mean they're able to be focused a little quicker when it needs to happen? Because, Pete may have been the tough, older kind of coach, but the team was still always, we talked about it last year a bunch. They were always having a good time. They were always pretty light. They didn't overreact to things. But when they really needed to bear down and say, like, we need to make this change, it's urgent, we didn't see that either. So I'm curious how Gulutzan and his staff can do that. And I think you mentioned David Pelletier, Neil Graham, the communication level and the roles they're going to have, I think are going to go a long way.
Luds, a big thing for the season this year is a full year with Mikko Rantanen. Mm-hmm. For training camp, I guess for me, I'm looking at, does he start to own this team like the superstar that we know he is, compared to last year when everything was all about just trying to get him comfortable after such a chaotic middle to back half of the season?
You know what? I think that's TBD for me. I mean, I think it is for him too. Who's he going to play with? I mean, we're talking about another finding a hole for that a top 6 spot there. Is Robo going to be the fixture on there with Hintz and him, or will there be somebody else that moves up there? Could it be Wyatt? I think the chemistry for Mikko is important. I mean, he played a long time with the same guys, and you can see that as he was going along in the 20 games he got in the regular season here, whatever it was, there was still some indecisions because again, understandable. You play with guys like Makar and McKinnon, guys like that are unbelievable players. They know each other so well. So he's still trying to develop that chemistry. I think last year with Granlund and Hintz, there was the parts were there. You had a guy that did a lot of work. You had a guy that could back people off with speed and open up some space for Mikko to hit guys coming late. So I think that's going to be a big part of what we see from Rantanen early on, especially. So I'm hoping when they get into the preseason games and whoever he's going to play with, I hope that we see those guys together, whoever it's going to be, as much as possible so that you can get in to game one, kind of hit the ground running with a couple guys next year.
Sam, the new players, Radek Fox is back. Nathan Bastian is signed, was on our show. We'll get our first look, really, of Vladislav Kolyachonok, acquired in the Matt Dumba trade. There aren't a ton of new faces, and Fox is an old face, but back. But there are a couple that have to be integrated into this group.
Yeah, and where do they fit, right? It's not as obvious as like, okay, we brought back Colin Blackwell, we know where he goes. It's where do they see? Let's just talk about the holes. There's not 9 forwards that go above the Nathan Bastians and Colin Blackwells. There are numbers that are available there, and so I'm curious to see how they're used and whether or not they maybe try to take a different type of role, or as Lud's talked about in the summer, putting one of those type of guys on every line to kind of even things out a little bit. So that's the forward group, kind of what I'm looking at. Kolyachonok, I have no clue what to expect. He's the odd man out here. Not a lot of us have seen a ton of him, and not a lot of us know what to expect of him. Is he just someone to come in and see what he can do in camp and bring a little competition, see maybe where he can go if he's a AHL, if he's an NHL, or is he someone they're really looking at to potentially fill a spot because they don't necessarily have the depth they had last year? I'm really curious because Luds and I watched a little bit of him playing before we did our show right after they made that trade over the summer, and he's got some skill. I mean, he's a very mobile defenseman. It'll be interesting to see whether or not he's even in the mix or if it's more of a bring him into camp and let's just see what he can do kind of situation.
And Luds, along with the new players, there's also the young players. Can they take a step? Obviously, Nils Lundqvist, Maverick Bourque, Leon Bischel are top of mind. But I also wrote down Wyatt Johnston taking a step, Sam Steele maybe taking a more elevated role, Thomas Harley going from a big role to a massive role. And what about Alex Petrovic? Does he stay on the NHL roster for the whole season this time, as opposed to the last 2 years only basically playing in the playoffs?
That's why when we do our little previews from other reporters and things like that, and they're all, man, these guys are going to be back in the play, or they're going to be going for the Stanley Cup. I have questions,
Yep.
Again, for everything that you said there. I mean, I'm hoping that Petro can push that, because I think that he's an element back there with Bischel being that big, strong pair of defensemen that make things difficult on opponents and in front of the net. Nils will just have to wait and see. I do think he's going to get a good chance and a good look with Gully. I think that there's going to be a bit of a weight off his shoulders there because, I think with everything that went with Pete and how he was used and wasn't used at certain times come playoff time, I think it was hard for him. So, but I'm just curious about the pace of the game and how they're going to play in their own zone. And again, I think that if Petro can get in there, I think you're a little bit more difficult to play against. And, the other one, the biggest one is probably Maverick.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, we had a chance to talk to him. I'm hoping that he can jump into what he was when he came out of, coming from the minors. And I think he's going to get a good look because they could use his speed. And I think the way he talks, he's okay playing anywhere. And there is that hole right now on the left side there in the top 6. So we'll see if he gets an opportunity there and he can take advantage of it.
Filling the voids, Mason Marchment is gone. Mikhail Granlund is gone. Cody Ceci, Evgeny Dodonov, and maybe to a little bit of a lesser extent, but still an NHL veteran, Matt Dumba. And Sam, you hope that between the new players, the young players stepping up, and the healthy players, you fill those voids. Miro Heiskanen, of course, with a knee injury, back after a full summer. Nils Lundqvist with the shoulder. And as you guys talked about from the golf tournament, Tyler Seguin with a shoulder.
Yeah, it'd be huge to have. When's the last time Tyler Seguin was fully healthy? Remember, he used to be always playing every year, all year, and then all of a sudden he had the hips and the knees and the shoulders and everything kind of started to snowball from there. But having those guys, I mean, look at what happened to this team when Miro Heiskanen went down. Everything went not to hell. I'm not going to say like they started losing every game until the end of the year, but everything had to be adjusted around them. So for them no one's going to get away without injuries during the season, but Dallas needs to find a way not to have that injury this year, right? Don't have the big guy go down for 4 months, or the two guys go down in the big time when they're trying to get some points. So the health's going to be huge for them, and I'm curious to see what it can do, because it feels like every year one of their big guys is either injured to start or is coming off an injury. Jake with the surgeries and the not able to train all summer. Robo with the injury right away. Maverick with the injury right away. It just doesn't feel like they've ever just gotten into a camp and been like, hey, most of our guys are good to go, feeling good. And I'm hoping that's the case this year, and we don't get some insight in the next couple of days here that someone had a surgery we didn't know about or something like that, because I'd really love to see this team come out of the gates and see what they actually are, because as of right now, we don't really know.
And to wrap up our segment, Sam just brought up two that I didn't write down, but he's absolutely right. Maverick Bork suffered a preseason before the first exhibition game, injury in training camp, and he talked about it. In fact, he used some colorful Luds language about how it was messed up. And then the Jason Robertson offseason surgery, which he clearly was affected by to start the year. And I know there's a lot of talk, and we've addressed a lot about the trade rumors and maybe not being actually on the block, but teams calling. A healthy Jason Robertson to start the year would be a huge thing for this team.
Well, like I said, for both of those two guys, and Robo's got a carrot dangling there. You know, the Olympics, that's important. And so I expect him to be
a contract.
Healthy. Well, the money. Yeah, I think that's probably going to be wrapped up before he starts. I think we're hoping. But I would like to, if I'm the Dallas Stars, I'd like to get it out of the way. But again, it's going to come up quick. But I think that with the Olympic thing out there for him and some health, I think that you'll see him come, shot out of the cannon kind of thing. And I think for Maverick, like I said, it's motivation for him knowing that there's a spot there. I'm hoping that they have a conversation with Mav and say, we got a spot here. Look, it's right here. And if you're willing to play the offside, if that's what happens, he made it sound as if he would be happy playing the offside. I think when you're a young player and you're looking for a spot and there's something there, you'll play wherever you want, wherever the coaches want you. So I think those two have there's carrots dangling right in front of them.
And we've hardly talked about it in this segment, although we've talked about it a lot on our show. Jake Ottinger, first action since getting pulled by Pete DeBoer in Game 5 of the conference final. So lots of things over the next few weeks to get ready to the season to watch during training camp. So for Sam, for Luds, I'm Owen. Thanks for watching.